Hello, my name is Lee Presser. This is my show. I speak frequently to very interesting people. Some of these conversations are so exciting, so intellectually stimulating, I thought others might like to listen in. This is the reason we started recording Conversation with Lee Presser.
Welcome to Conversation with Lee Presser. Just north of downtown St. Louis on the Illinois side of the Mississippi River is a 1,200-acre site operated by the Tri-City Regional Port District. The Port District operates an intermodal freight transportation system which has access to nearby railroad lines, passenger and freight airlines, and 4 major interstate highways. Transporting heavy, bulky products on the river by barge is the least expensive transportation alternative. According to the Army Corps of Engineers, St. Louis is the second busiest inland port in the United States. About 11 million tons of agricultural products, 10 million tons of coal, and another 10 million tons of petroleum, chemical, and manufactured goods move through the St. Louis ports. To speak about this important transportation system is today's guest, Dennis Wilmsmeyer, Executive Director of America's Central Port. Mr. Wilmsmeyer, welcome to Conversation.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
Just so people know what this is all about, this is a whole series that the Post-Dispatch has recently run about ports, about barges, and about transportation of goods.
Yes.
And your name is mentioned in this article, written by Tim Logan over at the Post-Dispatch. So we're not going to, we're not going to quote from there. We're simply going to talk about the important things that your business does. Great. First of all, would you define what an executive director of a port district does?
A lot of different things at America's Central Port in Granite City and Madison, Illinois. We have actually, not just in addition to the port district, the harbor itself, there are our tenants and operators handle and take care of, which is onloading and offloading of barges, trucks, and rail cars. In addition to that, we have the old former Army base property that was located there, 150 apartment units, about 1.6 million square feet of warehouse space, 60 or 70,000 square feet of office space, and then a lot of land available for development, of which we've attracted numerous companies to that. So we're a big landlord, basically, in operating and developing this property, in addition to the riverside uses that we have there.
So we're going to focus today on the port part of your business, right?
Yes. Okay.
What is a lock and dam, and why is it important to the United States?
Locks and dams were built, authorized by Congress, U.S. Congress actually in the 1930s. And the whole intent behind the locks and dams on the upper Mississippi River anyway was prior to that point, the late 1800s, early 1900s, ships, boats, paddle wheelers, stern wheelers, steamboats would get stuck in certain parts of the river as they were traversing up and down the river system, primarily from St. Louis northward. The reason for that was that there was just no navigation channel really, aside from the river itself. There was no management of the river. Floods would happen and occur, they would go out, there was no levee system to hold the river in to make it a navigation channel or to protect the people that lived behind the river system. So the locks and dams themselves were authorized by Congress to be constructed and built, and they started doing that in the 1930s, finished up in the early 1950s. And they went all the way from Minneapolis, Minnesota, down to St. Louis, actually in Granite City, Illinois, at locks 27, and that's the last lock on the Mississippi River system as you're heading south.
And what do they do?
They basically hold back water and allow that navigation to occur year-round, except when the river freezes over in certain months of the year in the upper stretches, the northern stretches of the river. But it essentially allows and guarantees for the Corps of Engineers to the navigation community a 9-foot navigation channel, which is enough to float a barge with towboats through that area. And again, it holds back the water and it keeps that held back through that whole stretch. The thought was at the time anyway, why not put some further south? We can talk about maybe the drought a little bit, but why not put any further south of St. Louis? The Missouri River dumps in and the Illinois River dump in, both just north of St. Louis. So it was always thought up until this last year that there would be plenty of water there to be able to take care of navigation on down south of Granite City, Illinois, or St. Louis.
So when a barge, or let's just say a ship, a boat, is coming from Minneapolis and heading down say to, let's go all the way to New Orleans. There are areas of the river that used to be at parts of the year where the water level was so low that they couldn't get by. They were wound up in the mud.
Absolutely.
And so a lock basically acts, it's like a little dam and holds the water level behind it up to the next lock.
That's correct.
But when they come into the lock, then these boats actually have to be lowered?
Yes.
And down to the level of the next lock?
Absolutely. It's a stair
step.
So
it's a stair step system.
Almost an escalator from Minneapolis all the way down to St. Louis. That's correct.
And what's the condition of the lock system along the Mississippi River right now?
Not good.
What does not good mean?
Well, a lot of these have not had much repair, maintenance, or improvements since they were installed in the 1930s and 40s. So we're looking at now 60 plus years or 70 years of deferred maintenance. It's
80, 90
years of deferred maintenance. There you go. Right.
This is we're almost up to 2015 here.
Right. Certainly on some of the older ones, that's correct. The one at Lock 27 recently has had a fair amount of money spent on it, on the gates themselves that open and close. It's been pretty much reconstructed. But a lot of the other ones up and down the river system, not just on the Mississippi River, but on the other rivers as well, the Ohio River and several others in the country, which are major shipping channels, have not had any or much money spent on those, and we're entering into a crumbling infrastructure.
What does this mean to the economy of the United States? Why is this important to the people who are listening to this program?
Money. It all comes down to money, and that is the price associated with moving commodities in this country. Unless we fix these, unless we put some more money back into fixing this infrastructure and make it dependable, make it reliable, make it usable again, we'll all continue, or we will all pay more money in the future.
So when people are driving over like the Poplar Street Bridge or the 270 Bridge or the J.B. Bridge, and they see those barges, like 15 different barges all lashed together carrying grain or something down the river, how much is actually in these barges? And like, let's just compare them to, say, like trucks that would be on the highway.
Yeah, so if you take that barge tow that you're talking about, that's lashing those barges together, 15 of them at a time, 3 wide, 5 long, which is standard on the upper Mississippi River, and even in the St. Louis area just immediately southward. 15 of those barges hold about 22,500 tons, equivalent to about 22,500 tons of product. So that's going to be equivalent to about 225 rail cars or over 1,000 tractor-trailer trucks that would be on the roadway just to move that one barge tow of product.
Okay, and the cost of putting them on the barges, moving the barge down, and taking them off, what's the cost relative to doing the same thing with trucks or with rail cars? Well,
once the commodity is in a transportation mode, obviously, to that transfer product, and sometimes these products get transferred 1 or 2 or 3 times. Obviously, the less you can handle it, the better. So that's why barge transportation is so cost effective, number one. You can put so much more commodity into one barge. And then it's on a floating superhighway as well. It is literally a highway that does not require maintenance on the river system. The water itself that's floating on that, obviously, our locks and dams, our levees need repair and upgrading. But from a floating perspective, it is very cost effective to move that product. In terms of truck and rail car, obviously, you have other costs, expenses associated with those, just the general pollution that's created by the truck and the rail to move that same amount of product is far worse than what is produced by one towboat that's moving that same amount of product.
Can you give people just some idea, when you say cost effective, how cost effective?
It depends on the commodities. I'd like to be able to say...
Let's just say wheat or beans.
Okay. And again, probably, just reaching at numbers here and not knowing where the commodity is headed to, where it's coming from, I mean, all those are variables that are taken into place. Obviously, for short haul, truck makes sense.
Yes.
I mean, if you're going across city, across town, or within a small radius area, a truck is going to make sense. But if you're talking about moving it from St. Louis to New Orleans on a large commodity or large volume of product, you could be looking at half to at least a third of the cost or more by barge versus rail or truck.
So it's a big deal.
Absolutely.
It's a big deal. And it helps keep commodity costs that people have to buy, cornflakes, sugar frosted flakes,
absolutely,
bread, all these things that are being moved, the transportation costs figures into the product that they buy at the grocery store.
Yes, it does.
So that the less expensive transportation costs, the less it costs at the grocery store.
Absolutely.
And that's your whole point here.
Yes.
So why was the low water on the river, which was reported during the fall of 2011 or 2012, why was that important to the barge industry?
Well, number one, I mean, and this started with the drought last year, really in the springtime. We saw, coming out of a very dry winter into a dry spring into a dry summer, we started seeing in about July the river level really dropping, and it didn't look like, for the next 6 months anyway, the forecast, long-term forecast, that there would be a whole lot of precipitation.
And they were right.
Yes, they were.
And they were
yes,
right.
they were right. And so what happened then was restrictions. Operators started putting restrictions on themselves. The river level itself got to a dangerous level in terms of, and there's a lot of talk about Grand Tower in Thebes, Illinois, with rock outcroppings in the river there. Obviously, you don't want to run a barge or a boat or a towboat or anything across a rock area for fear of damage to that and potentially sinking a boat. So the Corps of Engineers got involved at that point in trying to take down that rock outcropping. Other areas that dredging occurred to be able to keep that navigation channel open.
Now, this is all south of St. Louis.
That's all south of St. Louis, north of Cairo.
None of this was
correct.
going on
correct.
because of the locks and dams north of
Correct.
St. Louis.
That is correct.
Okay.
Right. And so the navigation channel, the dredging occurred to be able to keep that navigation channel open as full as we could for as long as we could. But operators just knew that once that level, and a lot of them will load to 11 or 12 feet depth. So once that river level in certain parts of that river from St. Louis southward down to Cairo, Illinois, started getting less than that 12-foot depth or 10-foot depth, they started light loading their barges, what's called light loading. You just don't put as much in it so it doesn't sink as far down into the water.
But the cost per unit starts going up,
Absolutely.
Right?
And that's where the cost comes back in again. And so the real concern was, will the river be shut down completely? Would it have been shut down completely? The Corps, the Coast Guard believed they were doing everything that they could, which they did. They did a great job.
If you had got some rains, right?
That's what saved us. Absolutely.
Right. And
It's
like
that precipitation.
Right. Right now, today is March the 12th, 2013, and we had recently had a good 2-inch soaking rain.
Yes.
That probably helps as well.
We went from a -5 to almost a -6 feet on the St. Louis gauge up to, we're over 20 feet today, I think 22 feet or 23 feet on the gauge. So we've had a 28-foot variance in the river level in the last 2 weeks.
But that's temporary though, isn't it?
It is temporary.
Unless you get regular rains,
Absolutely.
you could be back to a -6
Right.
before you know it.
We think we're through the worst of it. We're coming into late winter, early spring. There's been a significant amount of snow up north this year, especially in the last couple of weeks. Some good rains, and I think at least through this springtime, hard telling what the summer is going to bring this year, but through the springtime anyway, we should be fine on navigation through that stretch of the river from St. Louis to Cairo.
Okay, so the river is going to work, and
Yes.
therefore, now St. Louis is in competition with other cities to be a port district in what is called an intermodal mode. In other words, trains come to St. Louis, but they come to Memphis too,
Yes.
right? And highways like Interstate 70, 64, 44 come to St. Louis. And so truckers are bringing stuff here,
Yes.
but they also go to Memphis on 40 and other highways. So St. Louis and Memphis and other towns are in competition, aren't they, as places where all of these commodities are coming to and eventually being put onto a barge, right?
Yes.
And that's your port district's business.
Yes.
Okay. We are now, so why is that important to the people of St. Louis, who are the people who are generally hearing this right now,
Sure.
if they're not watching it on YouTube, which is possible?
We in the St. Louis region, we're centrally geographically located in this country. Number one. Number two, we've got a lot of blessings from a transportation standpoint. We used to be the number one.
4 major interstates.
Absolutely.
Right.
6 Class 1 rail carriers, the western carriers that end up here in St. Louis, the eastern carriers end up here as well. There's a little bit of overlap and cross with that, but basically we're a convergence point here for those rail lines. Great interstate highway, as you mentioned, and then with the river system coming right down through the middle. Illinois and the Missouri River all coming together right in the St. Louis area. we're perfectly positioned here in the St. Louis region to be able to handle that future intermodal and from a transportation perspective.
Now, according to Mr. Logan's article in the Post, there are even private companies now that are building their own port facilities to handle their own product, and therefore I guess, I don't know if they have their own barges or if they just have their own platforms from which they can load private barges. Is that?
Yeah, typically you'll see the barge companies operate the barges, the terminal facilities, the private terminal companies like you're mentioning operate their facilities.
Why are they building their own private facilities? Is there not enough public capacity?
They're seeing a lot of opportunity here, and obviously from a private investor, private developer's perspective, they want to go out and they believe that they can make more money and make a lot of money in this market yet today.
I guess I'm not understanding the answer to the question. The question I was asking was, these companies, they're in, what business are they in, the ones that are building this capacity? Are they in the business of handling grain, like Bunge?
Could be grain, could be coal, could be some other commodity.
So why are they using private facilities instead of existing, which they are building, they're spending money to build, rather than using public facilities like yours?
They're looking at it most likely from a return on investment. They want to own their facility, they want to operate their own facility. From a public perspective, you do give that up a little bit. So if we had the same company that came to us and said, I want to move this much commodity, this much product through your facility, we'd pretty much have to dedicate those to them, and we have an obligation to the rest of the public, those who want to use our facilities as well. So it does become a bit of a capacity constraint if they wanted to come through our facility and us to be able to handle or handle all their commodity at our facility as well. And they look at it, I'm sure, from their perspective, from just a private investment standpoint, that return on investment. It makes sense from them. They run the numbers, they've crunched the numbers. They want to own their own facility, they want to control their own destiny rather than going through a public facility.
Now, before we went on the air, I was asking you about in Jefferson County, Missouri, they are at the Doe Run facility, which is closing, or closed, and they are talking about building more capacity there. And I said, well, is there sufficient need? In your answer was?
Yes. We are working with, we've got a great group of people working together. We are in support of the Jefferson County facility. This is good for the region. The more we can push from an intermodal standpoint, barge transportation standpoint, it actually is helping, because a lot of people think of, well, there's only a limited amount of business out there. The way we look at it is the pie is too small, let's make that pie larger, and one way of doing that is actually introducing more terminal facilities, more port districts in and around the St. Louis region.
And hopefully, therefore, lower the cost per unit.
Absolutely. There are a lot of companies out there today that are not using barge transportation that probably should be, that maybe haven't gone through the cost-effective strategy. They're relying on a third-party logistics firm, and they're putting their product on a truck, when maybe it should be going on a rail, or maybe it should be going more likely by barge.
So you think that this discussion about low river water and talking about barges, and then the Post-Dispatch series might help these people to suddenly recognize that they need to do a cost study?
We're hopeful with that, Lee. Our industry, we don't get a whole lot of coverage about anything unless, unfortunately, it's something usually bad, right? A drought, an accident, or something like that. And so, or high water that may curtail operations or something like that. So we really are working to get that word out there about how cost-effective barges are and the transportation of those, and really want to help the St. Louis area companies to realize those costs and pass that on to the consumer.
But you did just mention some of the foibles of using river. On railroads, normally, unless there's like one heck of a snow, on the highways, same, unless there's one heck of a snow or rain. Highways are always moving, trucks are usually moving, trains are usually moving, and you're saying that, well, water high, water low, we might not be moving. Should these commodity people be in a position where they're where Mother Nature can affect whether they can deliver their product to market or not?
Well, in a lot of respects, even through this drought, it was still more cost effective to move those barges or move that commodity by barge. We were light loading at that point. We had delays down in the Grand Tower and Thebes area where they were taking out that rock. The river was shut down for 12 hours a day,
right.
And they were working on getting the barges through there at certain times. We have the same delays today sometimes when there's a problem either scheduled or unscheduled at one of the locks. You can get a backup at that lock and dam. Even with all that taken into account, though, barges still continue to be more cost effective in operating than do the rail cars and the trucks. Mm-hmm. And we're not trying to take away anybody's opportunity to pick what they want. The problem in a lot of respects in this country is we've gotten used to this overnight mentality. We want it there immediately. When a lot of these things, if they were just ordered a week in advance or 2 weeks in advance, and that supply was there, and that constant delivery another day later, if people thought more in terms of thinking ahead and planning ahead and ordering ahead, there's a lot of significant cost savings there to be realized.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that I've recognized in my reading is that there seems to be a considerable amount of public money that's going into river maintenance and I guess you guys got some public money.
Yes, we did.
In 2009 for what is it? Some sort of a channel or
South Harbor Development. We're putting in a new terminal facility.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So, is this profitable? Is your industry profitable enough? I guess I'm asking that question because if you're needing public money, maybe it's not profitable enough. Why don't you just describe that?
Yeah, absolutely. We've got a new terminal that's under development. It's called our South Harbor. It's south of Locks and Dam 27 versus our other one north of Locks and Dam 27. So we'll be situated on both sides of Lock and Dam 27, that last lock on the river. From a cost-effective standpoint, yes, we did receive a Tiger grant. It was called Transportation Investment Generating Economic Recovery.
Isn't it cute how they always come up with these acronyms?
Yeah, right.
Go ahead.
Great name.
Sorry.
But we did receive that starting in 2009 in order to put some money toward this development. Mm-hmm. That'll be funded partially by the federal government. We did receive some state of Illinois funding as well. The rest of that will be on the Port District itself. So we'll need to recoup that over time in order to build this facility, in order to get it fully operational. Mm-hmm. But the bottom line is, why is it there? Why is it needed when all these other terminal facilities are coming online in the St. Louis area or expanding or doing whatever? Bottom line is, it helps our companies located there as well as attracting other companies to the St. Louis area to utilize that barge transportation system. Mm-hmm. We've got a brand new rail system in place there. It's a rail loop. We can handle unit trains through that up to 100 cars at a time.
This is a new facility.
New facility, right, absolutely. Right. And to bring those in cost effectively and get that product handled cost effectively. Because again, if we're not doing what we can to keep up with the times, to expand, this barge transportation system becomes less cost effective, and consumer prices that all across the board on many, many commodities that you wouldn't even dream of start to rise up as well.
Mm-hmm. This facility for rail that you're talking about, do they actually, I have seen this in other places, I don't know, but they actually take the cars and turn them upside down and dump them?
We don't have one of the dump cars, and probably what you're referring to there is primarily on coal. They'll use that for coal cars and turning it. It's a rotary dump facility, but actually it picks the rail car up, turns it over for a quick dump out of there.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
I've actually seen that.
Right. And it's pretty neat that they've got the technology and the capability of lifting a whole fully loaded rail car, turning it upside down and putting it back on the track again and hooking it up again. So
okay, we're down to the last 5 minutes. Goes by just like that.
It does.
Now I want to turn it over to you. What is it that we haven't covered that you want to make sure that people know?
I want to talk about maybe a little bit more about the lock and dam system.
Okay.
You know, this drought that happened this year that we saw, really there's procedures in place, and I want to give the Corps of Engineers great credit for what they did in building this entire lock and dam system. The series of 27 plus locks from Minneapolis down to St. Louis have created an incredible ability for us to continue shipping through there on a normal basis throughout the year. Without that system in place today, and I refer to that almost as a slow draining bathtub, without that lock and dam system in place today on the northern stretch from St. Louis up to Minneapolis, we would have been shut down, I believe, on the river system way back in August of 2012, all the way from Minneapolis to Cairo, Illinois. Mm-hmm. The reason for that being is all that water, as you mentioned, gets held back by this series of locks and dams. that water is held back and then slowly metered through the system as barges are traversing through and allowing that water to more slowly trickle down into the lower reaches. The problem really though, and again, Corps of Engineers, fantastic job, great job in designing, building, constructing it. Two things. One is they're running out of money. They don't have the money there to be able to maintain these. The second one is the policy has changed since these locks and dams were built. So the reason the drought really affected us this year was the change in their policy on the Missouri River system. They now have all the authorized purposes that they need to take care of. When the lock and dam system was designed and constructed, they stopped at St. Louis near the Missouri River because they thought there'd be plenty of water coming in from the Missouri River to replenish that water from St. Louis southward. The difference now is the policy changed. They changed their policy about how they would release water from the upper stretches of the reservoirs on the Missouri River, and so it really strangled and choked the Missouri River this summer through the fall, and as the releases, when we were clamoring
briefly,
for
what are they doing with that water up the Missouri?
It's being held to replenish the reservoirs there for recreational purposes and for fishing and for water use purposes up on the upper stretches.
And those guys own that water up there, right? Those various states, they own the water.
They own the water.
Right.
Except,
by contract, they have contracts.
Right. Except for the policy, though, it seems to be totally opposite. When there's high water, they can't seem to get rid of it quick enough. So and it flooded us in 2010 and 2011, 2 years in a row, when there was a whole lot of snow and rain from up north through the Missouri River Reservoir. The releases they were letting out of there to keep from flooding up in the northern stretches, they couldn't get rid of the water quick enough. And it flooded everybody out down all the way down to Memphis through that system. And so it's that change in policy that really this year, had they known that back when they built this lock and dam system, you probably would have seen another 2 or 3 locks and dams on down to Cairo, Illinois, where the Ohio then dumps into the river and replenishes that water supply.
And it's, yes, the Corps of Engineers, they have basically done a good job. But then when you, in recent years, for whatever reason, they seem to be having some difficulty. We talked again before we came on the air about another lock and dam that's down by Paducah. And that baby is like $3 billion later and still
over
counting.
Budget, right?
Still
Way over
counting.
Budget, right?
Right, and that's chewing up a lot of money that could be going to the northern Mississippi.
Absolutely. I've found that the Corps does a great job of responding to emergencies and responding to very big projects that are designed over a long period of time, the entire lock and dam system.
Right.
Doing smaller individual projects, they do get, like the levee system and like the getting our levees upgraded and through that whole process, they do tend to get mired down in their own bureaucracy, and that's a frustration at the local level, frustration at the federal level, and something that I think over time needs to be changed.
It's a huge subject and way too much for a half hour. We're going to have you back and soon to further this discussion. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you.
I've been speaking with Dennis Wilmsmeyer. He's with America's Central Port, which is actually the old Army base over in Granite City, Illinois. This is a big deal, folks. I don't know if you caught on to this. This is stuff that actually affects you at the grocery store. Tell your friends that this is available on YouTube and they can watch this discussion. We'll see you next time. Thanks.